Now, we're moving on to our last seminar of today, and indeed of Spikes Asia 2016. And you'll be very happy, ladies and gentlemen, that you stayed until the very end, because we're about to welcome to the stage one of the world's most awarded and diverse creatives. An ad man, photographer, filmmaker, and multimedia artist, his work includes campaigns for Dixon's, Land Rover, Ariston, Silk Cut, and Coca-Cola. His iconic British Airways commercial called Face was named among the 100 greatest ads of all time. In 2011, he became the Chief Creative Officer of Ogilvy Mather China, and the following year he won Ogilvy Asia's first ever Cannes Grand Prix. I've been warned that we might need a large plate for this final seminar, as he advises us to eat your head. Please welcome now to the stage Ogilvy and Mather China's Chief Creative Officer, Graham Fink.
I asked for your number, but you wanted mine. You said,
thank you. I'm going to show you a video.
40 years ago, in millions of living rooms across the British Isles, a strange alien creature was beamed onto our television screens. With bright red hair and multicoloured spacesuit, his unearthly appearance shocked the nation. But for many teenagers who experienced this televisual visitation, it would change their lives forever. This messianic Martian was with us only for a year, but his impact will be felt for generations to come. Music on planet Earth would never be the same again. Armed with laser-guided melodies and lyrics from another dimension, Ziggy Stardust heralded a new era of rock music.
I'm an alligator. I'm a mama, papa coming for you.
A time of outlandish fashion.
People stare at the makeup on his face.
Outrageous sexuality.
I'm down, thank you, man.
And good old-fashioned rock and roll music.
Gene Genie lives on his back. The Gene Genie loves in the stacks. He's outrageous.
So, what made this mysterious extraterrestrial one of the most influential cultural icons of the 20th century?
Now Ziggy played guitar.
So the title of my talk today, Eat Your Head. I put it on a plate. If you're lucky enough to get one of these things and you want me to sign it later, I'll be around. So why eat your head? Well, I think that from the beginning of time, when the human race was born and created, we have always created things. You are all creators. Everyone on this planet is a creator. We sent rockets to the moon. We put probes onto asteroids. We've fired minuscule particles around huge accelerator chambers at the speed of light, and we can measure it. We build buildings, we build phones, we build communication systems. We are all creators. So we've always been able to play, we've always been able to experiment, and you've just watched, I think, one of the greatest of all experimenters, David Bowie. He was never frightened of changing things and trying things. And it's funny, isn't it? I mean, at one time, all of you out here, you must have been that high, right? And as you grow up, this thing starts coming in called self-doubt. And we start to question ourselves. And should I say this? And should I not say that? Especially in this politically correct world. We have to be very kind of careful with social media out there. And the self-doubt creeps in, and we kind of worry about things, and we're scared of doing things, and the fear paralyzes us. And we work in the ideas business, communications, marketing, advertising. And in agencies today, we have many, many meetings. Should we give this to the client? Should we give them that to the client? Should we do a third route? Do we need to cover our asses off? We have big data. We sit and we ponder and we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk. And the more we talk and the more we analyze and we research and we re-research, I think we sort of lose our way. And often I look at the final work that goes out, and if I look at the fragments of the early ideas, I think there was so much more energy there that comes out in the end. And I just think we overthink too much. Thinking, of course, comes from the head. The real stuff, the real beauty comes from here, from the heart. So my message is, chop off your head and let your heart sing. Chop off your head and eat it. So this is a painting, it's a detail actually from the brilliant French-Russian artist Marc Chagall. And he understood color like no other artist. Picasso said he was the greatest painter for color. It's just beautiful. And he took like fragments of dreams, people floating around. Incredible painting, not just paintings, he did stained glass windows in cathedrals. An amazing artist. And this is what he said, I love this said. He said, if I create from the heart, nearly everything works. If from the head, almost nothing. And surely this is the point. Creativity comes from the heart. And when we want to persuade people, we want to move them, we've got to use our heart to tell stories, because we are in the moving business, if you like. Now, I was very lucky. I worked in the 80s for this fella, Paul Arden. He was a great, great boss and a fantastic mentor to me. And Paul used to do everything pretty much with his heart. And Paul, when you would present work to him, and of course I was young in those days, I would go in and present work to him, and we were sort of terrified. And Paul would look at the ads, and then he would often go, and then, because he had a bit of a stutter, he would go, it's not right, it's not right. And you go, oh, fuck, I'm going to lose my job. And then you'd sit with Paul, and he would get his scissors out, and he would start kind of cutting up things. It was amazing, magical stuff, and he would move things around. And often, it could be that he just moves the logo from the bottom right-hand corner to the left, and he would go, yes, yes, that's it. And we had a saying at Saatchi's, don't listen to what he says, feel what he means. And I thought that was great. When I'd been there a few months, and a very big brief came in for British Airways, the brand commercial to run in 132 countries in the world. And all I knew was there was lots of fantastic talent at Saatchi's at that time, and I wanted our script, me and my copywriter, Jeremy Clark, to win, you know. And that was probably the first big mistake I made, because we spent too much time thinking we're going to beat everyone. Then we started to try and write the work. And because it was such a big challenge, I think the fear got in the way. And we presented script after script to Paul. He kept blowing our work out. Luckily enough, he was blowing everybody else's work out. This was in the 80s. We did have 2 months to do something, but we needed something great. And then one day we had this amazing idea, and we took it into Paul, and he went, it's not right. And we were absolutely devastated. And we walked back to our office, and I'll never forget this. We walked into our office, we sat down, we didn't look at each other, we were in total silence, and we were beaten. We'd just totally given everything, and it wasn't good enough, and it was all over. And I just remember staring at the carpet. And bang, the whole thing came in. Everything came in, every detail. And I scribbled it out on this storyboard, and Jeremy and I worked up a few details, but it came in less time than the final commercial runs. Where does that come from? It certainly doesn't come from the head. And this is what we did.
world's favorite airline brings 24 million people together.
Thank you. You know, I was just calculating. Obviously, I made that when I was 10. That was made 30 years ago. And when I look at it today, you can sort of see gaps in the thing, because that was done for real. There was no special effect. You couldn't put people in those days. Today, I guess it would all be CG. It was all made for real. So here's another example. There's this guy, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and he was a poet. And he wrote this very famous poem called Kubla Khan. And the story goes, is well documented, that he was suffering from dysentery, and the doctors had given him some opium grains. And he'd taken these opium grains, and he went to sleep, and he dreamt this whole poem, Kubla Khan. And you probably know it. It starts, in Kubla Khan, a pleasure dome, in Xanadu, a Kubla Khan, a mighty pleasure dome decree. And he woke up, and it was 200 lines. He could see it clearly, and he started writing down the fragments of his dream. He was putting it all together. He was getting really, really excited, and suddenly there's a knock on the door. And it was his friend of his, a visitor. So he goes to see him, and they sit and they chat for an hour, and then he comes back to his desk. He picks up his pen. Guess what? Guess what had happened? He'd lost it all. Well, he'd written enough stuff so he could remember bits and the fragments, and he ended up writing this poem, which they still say is his greatest ever poem, but it was only 54 lines instead of the 200. Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't been not interrupted? And I kind of joke in advertising, the creators are sort of doing this, and the account man says, "Lads, how you doing?" Here's another one, going back to Bowie and thinking of Paul Arden cutting up the things. Bowie always used to try different things to break out the convention of writing lyrics. It's a very old film, so the quality is terrible, but you'll get the idea.
This is the way I do cut-ups. I don't know if it's like the way Brian Geisen does his or Burroughs does his, I don't know. But this is the way I do it. I've used this method only on a couple of actual songs. What I've used it for more than anything else is igniting anything that might be in my imagination. I mean, you can often come up with very interesting attitudes to look into. I tried doing it with diaries and things, and I was finding out amazing things about me and what I'd done and where I was going. And a lot of the things that I'd done, it seemed that it would predict things about the future or tell me a lot about the past. It's really quite an astonishing thing. I suppose it's a very Western tarot. I don't know. Anyway, let's see what happens.
I'm an alligator.
So these are the final lyrics. I'm an alligator, I'm a mama papa coming for you. I'm the space invader. I'll be a rock and roll bitch for you. Keep your mouth shut. I love this. You're squawking like a pink monkey bird. And I'm busting up my brains for the words. And apparently he went on and he worked with a guy that built Shazam, and they built an app which was a word randomizer, which he carried on using. And the other thing I loved about him was the bravery, how he would keep changing his look. This was from the album Aladdin Sane, and they wanted to do Bowie on the cover, and Bowie turned up. He didn't know what he wanted to do, to this great photographer who actually used to be a friend of mine, Chris Duffy, and Duffy was an amazing photographer. He did a lot of fashion, he shot Twiggy. He was a real eccentric. I didn't know him very well, but I met the guy, and he was totally out there. He was totally out there. And Bowie turned up, and they're discussing what to do with this album sleeve. And there's another knock on the door, and it's Duffy's son. And this is documented too, that Bowie opens the door to his son, and he said, "Your dad's a fucking lunatic." And Chris Duffy grabs the makeup lipstick off the makeup artist, and he put the zigzag bolt of lightning, which apparently he saw on the side of a saucepan or a rice cooker in his kitchen. And that's where it came from. And you can see by the shine that it's you know, lipstick. And they shot this iconic cover. And the other story I love about him is in perhaps his most famous character, Ziggy Stardust. At the height of his fame, he killed him off. So after a year, can you imagine that? You've got a great, great idea. When it's all going so well, you decide to destroy it. Real creative balls. He didn't know what he was going to do next. And I loved, after he died, this was going around on social media. Look at all these different styles, and his music changed as well. So here's the other one I ask an audience. It's a bit too many of you today, but I just say, have an idea. And if I had a microphone now, I come down and point it to someone and say, have an idea. Go on, give me an idea. And people go, pink oranges. And you go, pink oranges? Okay. I asked someone this morning, give me an idea. And they said, I want to fly. So you know as well as I do that great ideas don't just come up like that. And what's interesting is when you're working on an idea, you write all this stuff down. And hopefully you do have a bit of time, and you might get a few thoughts. You don't have anything great. And then what happens, of course, is you go for a walk, you completely switch off, or you go and have a shower, or you feed your ferret, and bang, the thing comes in, right? Actually, I can see a lot of you nodding, right? We've all had that experience. And then I ask people, what's the difference? And they say, well, of course, you're less stressed. Yes, you're less stressed. You're not trying too hard. No, you're not trying too hard. You get rid of all the obstacles. Yes, you get rid of all the obstacles. But what is the big difference? And this is a bit you're going to hate. This is the bit you're really going to hate. The difference is when you're trying to do it, you cannot do it. When you're not trying to do it, you do it. Therefore, you didn't do it. It's not your idea. Now, the ego has a real problem with this. And I suggest if you want a pay rise and you come up with something like British Airways, you say, hey, that was my idea. But actually, that idea wasn't mine. It just came to me. And I like this idea of ideas that are out there in the ether. You have to find them. I think it's so much nicer. So take more showers. You'll smell so much better. Not you smell. I'm sure you've seen this. This is a terrifying thing, isn't it? A blank sheet of paper. There's a lovely story. I used to run an art school in London. I did this thing completely free every month. Anyone who wanted to come, just turn up. And we did all sorts of weird ones in strange places. The last one we did was in the Houses of Parliament. We managed to get in. 200 students came in. And we did some stuff. And every one of these sessions, these two students would come up at the end, because they're all a bit timid students, and they'd always never ask questions, right? But at the end, when people leave, they all kind of come up, oh, can I ask you a question? And they'd show me their book. And they would come to all the sessions, and they would always show me their book, and their book was always terrible. And I would try and give them some advice. Their names were Ray and Simon. And I said to them one day, I said, look, you always show me this stuff. I said, I think you're getting worse. I said, the trouble is, I think you're trying too hard. I said, what I think you should do, and I came up with this technique, get 100 sheets of paper, and every minute you put an idea down. So let's say you take a brief for something. Let's say it's Twix bar. You write down something for Twix every minute. If you can't think of anything, you just put a squiggle or a smiley face, or you just make a mark. And you turn it over, and you never, ever look at it. That's the point. In the afternoon, you take a different brief. You do 100 thoughts. Whatever comes into you, just comes into your mind. And you do that every day for the week. And I said, at the end of the week, that's 7 days, because you're students, you work Saturdays and Sundays. And I think that's 1,400 sheets of paper. I said, and just see what happens, but don't look at them until the end. Anyway, do you know what they did? They went off and did it. I didn't think they were going to do it. And a month and a week later, ding dong, they knock on my door, and they come in with like 1,400 sheets of paper. I said, you fucking lunatics, you've done it. And on it, they said, we haven't seen it. And I said, I'll go through it with you. And we went through all the stuff together. And we found some interesting things, and we worked on it. 2 weeks later, they got a job. And a month after that, the creative director, a friend of mine, John Messam, called me up and he said, those guys have gone through the entire agency's supply of layout pads for the year. He said, they're costing me a fortune. And do you know what was lovely? In Cannes this year, I was sitting up on the final night watching the show, and those two guys, they won a gold. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. Here's another one. There's an American writer, Jack Kerouac, and he invented this whole generation called the Beat Generation. Look it up. I think this is amazing. And it was all about stream of consciousness thoughts. It's just stream of, not thoughts, of it just coming through you. And he wrote this book. He wrote the entire book in 3 weeks. And in those days, it was typewriters. And even the way he used the typewriter, he used to hit the type buttons like he was playing some kind of jazz. He was really into jazz. And what he did, because he didn't want to keep changing the paper, he sellotaped all the, don't you think this is amazing? He sellotaped all the pages together. And he wrote the book. Have a look at this clip.
All that road going, and all the people dreaming in the immensity of it. In Iowa, I know by now that children must be crying in the land where they let the children cry.
I think we're going to start at the beginning here and go as far as we can go. Yeah, it's just under 120 feet. It's only been rolled out the full length twice. Once was at the University of Iowa, and then the other was in Indianapolis for the Super Bowl. He could type over 100 words a minute and didn't want to interrupt his thoughts. Treated the typewriter, I think, very much like the keys on a saxophone. It's a very physical act of typing, and he just launched into it. After, he had all of his notes assembled. He had made several attempts to begin this novel, but when he sat down for those 3 weeks, he was determined to just go through and get it all down. So I think that's just an incredible rush of creative energy.
Don't you think that's extraordinary? I was telling a friend of mine about this yesterday, and I had goosebumps. They were kind of coming up on my arm. I just think that is just amazing. Who does that? Copywriters out there, just write and try, and the way he was writing, like jazz, it's amazing. So Picasso says every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. Well, of course, all those kind of thoughts come in, so don't grow up. I found a clip from, I don't know if you've seen a film by Karl Lagerfeld. It's called Lagerfeld Confidential. And this is what he says. He talks about dreams. Here, have a look.
Les choses les plus potables que j'ai fait dans ma vie, c'est des choses que j'ai vues en rêve. Je me lève et je les dessine. Donc je ne sais pas qui les a fait. Mais malheureusement, vous ne pouvez pas compter là-dessus. C'est ça qui est horrible. Quelquefois, ça va jusqu'au défilé, décor compris. Par exemple, vous vous rappelez la haute couture du mois de juillet avec les manteaux noirs et tout ça. Hein? Ouais. Décor compris, j'ai tout vu dans le rêve. Après, j'ai fini les détails. Mais la base, je l'ai tout vu. C'est une chose effrayante parce qu'on ne peut pas compter dessus. On dit, bon, ça va. Non, ça n'arrive pas souvent. Ça, c'est quand même quelque chose d'assez surprenant parce que je ne m'endors pas avec des idées de robes en disant ça bouillonne dans ma tête, je ne suis pas couturasse à ce point, hein, je veux dire, non, j'adore ce métier, mais ça ne me préoccupe pas plus que tout ce que je fais d'autre, les photos, les livres et le reste, je veux dire, ça fait partie de ma vie. 200% apparemment, puisque il y a un trop-plein dans le subconscient. Mais c'est pas médité du tout.
Like he said, these things don't come along that often, and they don't, unfortunately. But you need to sort of prime yourself to be on receive all the time somehow. So I love this story. Obviously, John Lennon, he had an idea for a song. It was a fragment of a song.
I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. And though the news was rather sad, well, I just had to laugh.
And then his mate, Mather, also had a fragment.
Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. Found the way downstairs and drank a cup. And looking up, I noticed I was late.
So they go to George Martin, their producer, known as the fifth Beatle, and he had this idea of putting the two things together with a full orchestra. And he worked with Lennon and McCartney on this. If you look at the musical notations, you have all the musical notes from Lennon, and you have all the musical notes from McCartney. And what George Martin did, 24 bars to join it together, he just wrote a squiggle, a squiggly line. And Lennon explained to the orchestra, you've got to go from this note, this tempo, this key, to this tempo, this key, over this amount of time. And it's up to you. And this is what it sounded like.
I saw a film today, oh boy. The English army had just won the war. A crowd of people turned away, but I just had to look, having read the book. I'd love to turn you. Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. Found the way downstairs and drank a cup. And looking up, I noticed I was late.
So I kind of feel George Martin there kind of played the role of a really good account man or planner. Like, you know, we're all in this together. Ideas can come from anywhere. And he helped them put this two thing together. Amazing. And John O'Hegarty often talks about the account man. He said, okay, you're not the Rolling Stones, but you're the manager of the Rolling Stones. And I love that expression. I think it's fantastic. So very quickly, the mysterious story of PlayStation. I'm sure you all know the PlayStation symbols, a triangle, a square, a circle, etc. And I was working on this project, and I couldn't think of anything. The same thing happened. And then I had a moment where I stopped trying to think, and the whole thing just came in. And I started drawing all these kind of circles. And it reminded me a bit of this, blood. And I looked up some blood on the internet, and I thought, if you played PlayStation all day long, 24/7, you might start getting a bit ill. And you go to your doctor, and you say, I'm not feeling too good. And he takes a sample of your blood, and he looks through, and this is what he would see. So that was a 10-second commercial. It ran just like that. And guess whose blood it is? It's my blood. And this was the poster. And again, I went to the hospital, they took an armful of blood and they prepared it. I went back the next day and shot it on a microscopic camera and then retouched in the symbols because they're not actually in my blood. And it was a great, brave client. They ran it just like this. So the thing I just want to finish on is to talk about a new way of drawing. So, you know, I'm looking at faces now, and I've been fascinated in faces, and I think that we all look at faces perhaps more than anything else on earth, because we're always looking at faces. And artists have been shooting, or photographers, artists have been doing portraits for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And I was working away, trying to do a face in a new way. And I've always been interested in this thing called pareidolia, where you just draw a line and then a face starts to appear. And I wondered if it was possible to just do that, to just draw a line. But the thing that gets in the way is in my eye, that's very, very pure. My art teachers used to say, just look. And when I started drawing, this arm sort of got in the way, and so did the pen, because I couldn't make this do what I had here. I thought, if I could just look at people and draw them, wouldn't that be amazing? So you'll laugh at this. If you're creative, I mean, the people we always hate are Middlewood Brown, right? You're not filming this, are you? Because Middlewood Brown tend to destroy a lot of ideas. But funnily enough, they were the first people I called up, and I said, I'm interested in this face tracking stuff. And they said, we don't do that, but they put me in touch with this, these people called Toby, the world leading eye trackers. And they sent me a coder, and I designed a piece of software with him. It took us about 6 months, because this is what interested me, is when you look at people, they had this in the 50s and the 60s, that would be the tracking of the eye. They could track people's eyes, and I was interested in that line. This is eye movements of a woman looking at a man. Obviously, this is in the early days, because there's no marks around this area. They're all at the face. And more recently, this. But I thought, is it possible to do that with my eyes? I mean, I designed something that could. I wanted to almost hold my eyeball, not hold a pen. And this is a little test film I did. So the eye tracker is just here, directly below the screen, and it's got 2 infrared beams, and it's shining into my eye, and it's tracking my eye movement. And it's intense concentration. It's not easy to do. It took me about 3 months to train my eye to control it. So this was, I think, the very first one I did. And you can see it's very kind of erratic. And then I got better at it. And this is actually just one continuous line. Now, what's interesting is I don't draw portraits, because if someone distracts me, then the line goes off the screen and back. And so one day I tried to draw my assistant, and this is what's happened. Because when I'm looking at the assistant, I'm looking off and back. And then I print the final pieces onto marble, big pieces of marble. And eventually I worked out a way of looking directly at the subject, so I could do a self-portrait. That was a self-portrait in a mirror. And then recently an arts magazine called up and commissioned me. They said, do you think you could draw your eye with your eye? And I thought, well, I'll have a go. And I got the mirror. It's like really, it was really, really difficult. But eventually I did it. So that's one continuous line. So look, I think if you don't know what you're doing, you're in a great place. I really think that. You know, that's fine if you don't know what you're doing. That's where the great stuff happens. And of course, you've got to put all the stuff into your head. You've got to fatten up your head. But then, of course, you've got to eat it. So I need some assistance. I've got my glamorous assistants, if you could quickly run up here. I'm just going to end on a video. And Give them a round of applause. They've been waiting all day for this moment. Okay, let's see what happens.
How come you're always such a fussy young man? Don't want no Captain Crunch, don't want no Raisin Bran. Well, don't you know that other kids are starving in Japan? So eat it, just eat it.
Here we go.
Don't wanna argue, I don't wanna debate. Don't wanna hear about what kind of food you hate. You won't get no
Down into the
dessert
aisle.
till you clean off your plate. So eat it. Don't you tell me you're full, just eat it. Eat it. Get yourself an egg and beat it. Have some more chicken, have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried, just eat it.
Thank you.
Standing ovation, I think, for our final speaker, Graham Fink, everybody. On your feet. Graham Fink, Chief Creative Officer of Ogilvy Mather, China. On your feet, please. On your feet. Fantastic.
Thank you. You're great.
Thank you, Graham. Great way to bring it in to Spikesager 2016. You're a star. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed to all of our speakers and, ladies and gentlemen, to you for being a fabulous audience, being so engaged. See you next year. Have a great time this evening, but see you next year. Thank you.